Hey there, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike. Superfly Comics Guy here to take you through the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus Volume 2 today. We'll be taking a look at the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through where I can share some of my own thoughts, opinions, and recommendations with you guys. So, if you enjoy the video at any point, you know how to show it, and feel free to slide down the bat pole and leave your own thoughts in the comments down below. But in the meantime, grab your cape and cowl, and hopefully your mind stays in one piece as we flip through this book. But for now, let's go. So starting off with the dust jacket here, we have this cover by Frank Whiteley. This is the only cover available, no variant covers. And I think it's all right. I understand why they picked it. Frank Whiteley does quite a bit of the art in this omnibus, and this image sort of encapsulates some of the themes you'll be reading about in this book. But I don't think it would have been my number one choice. Here is the spine for you, which you'll find is very, very similar to Volume 1 and 3. This entire set does look quite nice on the shelf when you have them together. And then the back. Now, there is an image I would have loved to see for the cover of the dust jacket. That would have been real nice. But like I said, I understand why they picked the one they did. Cover price here of 75 US, 99 Canadian. And we're collecting Batman and Robin 1 through 16, Batman 700 to 702, and Batman the Return of Bruce Wayne number 1 through 6. Let's flip this over and take a look under the dust jacket. There we go. So you'll see the design is pretty consistent with Volume 1 and 3, although the colors are just inverted on Volume 2 compared to those other volumes. So this portion is white and this portion is black instead of the other way around. Man, I'm such an idiot. I swear the first time I saw this cover, I thought the top part was the bat and it was like a bat hanging upside down, but no, the bat is right here. What are you talking about? I'm just dumb. But there is the spine. And there's the back. So nothing too spectacular, but it's a very clean design, so it gets the job done. But for now, let's start diving through the story. Okay, so now to show you a little bit of the inside of this book, but I want to be very, very careful. I'm not going to show you too much. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that could be spoiled in this omnibus, so I want to be very, very careful of that. So I'd rather just try to show you a little bit, give you some ideas of some of the stories you'll be getting in here and kind of give you the basic premise, but I don't really want to go into too much detail here. Here I'm happy to see that we have a table of contents and listing some of the stories you're getting in here, and I'm happy to report you do also get the occasional page numbers to help you keep track of where you are. So that's very, very nice to see. But yeah, definitely, if you haven't checked out my Volume 1 review, go take a look at that first. That'll sort of fill in some of the blanks for you in terms of where we are in the story. Because yeah, I definitely don't recommend reading Volume 2 before you've read Volume 1. Even if you've read Volume 1, this one might get a little bit confusing for you. So definitely, this isn't meant to be read on its own, I wouldn't say. But in terms of where we are in the story, I'd say the most important thing for you to know is that right now, Bruce Wayne is not Batman at this point in time because he's occupied with this little thing called Final Crisis, which was a big thing going on in the DC universe at this time. So somebody else had to fill in for the role of Batman. So who would that be? None other than Dick Grayson himself, or also known as Nightwing. So to many, that seems like the obvious choice, right? That's nothing groundbreaking. It's like, who else would fill in for Batman? Of course, it's going to be Dick Grayson, right? But think about what that does. Think about the implication of that. Because normally you have Batman, Bruce Wayne, this sort of dark, broody figure. And then you have Robin, his sidekick, who's this more upbeat, cheery type of character. Now you have Dick Grayson as Batman, who's this more cheery, upbeat, quippy type of Batman. But then you have Damian Wayne, who's this sort of dark little broody kid. And now we've completely shifted the dynamic of the dynamic duo. And that just leads to a lot of fun interactions and stories. That's honestly one of the coolest parts of this omnibus, is seeing that sort of relationship evolve and change. Yeah, I gotta say, my first impression of Damien years and years ago before I read this run was not a good one. But I gotta say, man, as this series went on, Damien really started to win me over. I wouldn't say he's my favorite Robin or anything like that, but I'd say he's earned his place in that sort of Robin lineup. So the first arc here sort of deals with this new villain known as Professor Pig. Let me see if I can find an example. There he is. Yeah, he's a really creepy new villain in this series. He's obsessed with perfection. He kidnaps people and basically performs forced plastic surgery on them to sort of transform them into what he calls a Dolatron, this sort of his own image of perfection that serves his every whim. And yeah, he's a really creepy guy. You can also see some examples here of Frank Quitely's artwork, who does quite a lot of the art in this omnibus. He definitely wouldn't be my first pick to do a Batman title, but you know, he worked with Grant Morrison on New X-Men in the past and an All-Star Superman, so it makes sense that they would work together again. And I think Frank Quitely's okay. It's just that the one thing I often can't get past is how he tends to draw human skin as this sort of weird, lumpy, leathery, potato-looking thing, texture. That never really quite sat right with me. But I know a lot of people like Frank Quitely's artwork. But oh, speaking of artwork, check out this next arc here. This is an arc involving Red Hood. And here we have some freaking mental-looking artwork by Philip Tan. I think this section of the book has probably my favorite artwork. Yeah, just crazy detailed and action-packed and dynamic. But this section is pretty interesting. Red Hood comes back. So we have kind of Batman and Robin versus Red Hood and this new sidekick he has called Scarlet. And you think that that might be it, but then this other character known as Flamingo starts showing up and sort of causing problems for them. And you look at Flamingo at first and it's like, wow, this is a very fabulous looking supervillain. But then you come to find out he's quite deadly in his own right as well. There's a bit later on where Batwoman shows up, and there's a bit of a crossover there involving, well, some of the League of Assassins and some Lazarus Pit stuff, which I don't want to spoil, but is very, very cool. Batman and Robin around this time also run into this character known as Oberon Sexton, and they can't really figure out what to make of him. He's like this mysterious investigator type of guy, but they can't figure out, like, is this guy on our side? Is he helping us solve these various cases, or is he just another lunatic? So there's a bit to discover there. Oh, here's a story. Here's a very Morrison-y story. Time and the Batman. So this is pretty cool. It sort of explores this idea of three different Batmen at three different points in time. So you have the past, the present, the future, and you're sort of hopping around these different timelines with different artists. So yesterday, and then moving on to more present stuff. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, and then today with Frank Quitely. And hold on, let me see if I can find one of my favorite panels in this omnibus. Where is it? And even further future, we got freaking Batman Beyond, penciled by David Finch. Gotta love that. But yeah, that's the thing about the art in this omnibus. It's like you have so many different artists in one book. I already mentioned Frank Quitely and Philip Tan, but you also have Tony S. Daniel and Andy Cooper and just a whole host of other artists, Cameron Stewart, which is great. But I will say, because of the wide variety of artists in this omnibus, chances are you probably won't love all of them, but there definitely, well, most likely will be at least a couple that you really, really click with and like. There's an example of Oberon there, that mysterious investigator I talked about, who at this point in time is actually helping Batman piece together this sort of mystery that they're working on, but it's like you can't shake the feeling that there's something shady about this guy, but you just don't know what it is. But just like in Volume 1, the Morrison approach to Batman storytelling is still present here, where I mean that Morrison basically takes Batman's entire comic history and treats it as canon. So like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s eras of Batman, he treats that as if it all happened, and he sort of works those elements into the story here. So there may be a lot of like very specific niche references that you might miss. I know I definitely didn't catch all of them. There were bits that were confusing me too. So you might want to keep that in mind. And I'll say the story really only gets more Morrison-y as this omnibus goes on. I'd say this volume, this omnibus volume 2, is probably the most Morrison-y of the 3 volumes. I don't want to flip too close to the end for that specific reason. I don't want to spoil things, but especially stories like this, the return of Bruce Wayne, that sort of hops back and sort of explains what Batman was up to during Final Crisis and how he works his way back into the story. This is the stuff that gets pretty Morrison-y. I haven't even read Final Crisis at the time that I read this book, and I still haven't read Final Crisis. So there was some confusion for me around that, about what the heck was going on and why why Bruce Wayne was in the situations he was in. But you can kind of piece it together on your own, even if you haven't read Final Crisis. Now, as I said, I really don't want to talk too much more about the story here because there's so many twists and turns I think you should discover for yourself. But one of my favorite parts actually was this extra section here, because we start off with this sort of behind the scenes piece talking about the different aspects of working on this series. So for example, the covers. I know one of the things people might not be super into was like, what the heck, why are the covers so bright and cheerful looking? But it's kind of tied to that whole twist to the dynamic duo of how you have a cheerier Batman, but then a broodier Robin. And it's sort of throwing back to the more colorful covers of like the Golden Age, the Silver Age, different time periods. Like you see all these homages. Yeah, you remember that cover I showed you before? Oh, this cover is really cool. I'll get into why that is later, but keep that cover in mind. I'll talk about it later. So look at this. You may not realize it at the time because it's upside down, but it's actually an obscure homage to the Killing Joke cover, or one of the panels from the Killing Joke. Look at that, how you see like a faint sort of Joker face when you turn this cover upside down. It's crazy. Other examples of issue covers here. Oh, there's a funny one actually I want to show you. A lot of people were pretty frustrated with Damian at this time. He didn't make the strongest first impression on a lot of people. He's sort of muscling his way into the Robin role. So they did a bit of a bait and switch here. It's like they draw this cover of Batman just throwing Damian off of a ledge, and they're like, yeah, as if that would happen. But maybe we were just pulling the legs of some of those Damian haters. And I just really like this type of extras. This is like one of my favorite type of extras, when the creators can just give you some of their commentary and insight about why they made some of the decisions they did as they were crafting the story. But outside of the behind the scenes, you also get things like different character designs, Batmobile designs, logo designs, villain designs. Some of these I'll have to skip because they contain spoilers, but you generally get the gist. So yeah, skipping a bit farther along, we also finish up with some sketch work here of the different characters and plot elements. Yeah, if nothing else, I'll say they get very, very creative with some of the plot elements in here. Some details of the Batcave, and finishing off here with a variant by Mike Mignola. And that is your extras section. Now, as for the build quality of this omnibus, you have 691 pages. There is the eye that you're working with, and it's okay at best. It's not great. When the buffered white space is there, you don't get that much gutter loss, which is nice. But when you don't have that, you do get a little bit of gutter loss. But I will say the pages are absolutely fantastic in this omnibus. You won't ever get any color bleed or anything like that. But you can see there's a little bit of gutter loss here happening with this spread page. And the other issue, because of that tighter binding, is this book will try to lift up and shut on you the closer you are to the beginning and end. Mine isn't that bad because I was stretching it, as I was reading as well, but, you can see it's still not perfect. It still sort of lifts up and wants to close on itself. But it's not terrible, and as I mentioned at the beginning, you do get that table of contents and these occasional page numbers that sort of help you navigate. So that is nice. But as we wrap up this review here, I just want to give some general thoughts and opinions on this omnibus. So I don't think it's quite as good as the first volume, but I definitely still had a good time with this one overall, even if I did find myself getting lost in the story a few times, because let me tell you, this will mess with your head on quite a few occasions. But my favorite bits were definitely just seeing Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne's evolving relationship, that sort of broody Robin, but more upbeat Batman. The Red Hood story arc was great, and there's just some really stellar art just all throughout this book. This one, I think, is definitely the most Morrison-y volume of the three. But if you can handle this volume, then I think you'll be all set for volume 3 as well. But hey, that's a review for another day, huh? But yeah, that's been my review of the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus Volume 2. Let me know what you thought about this book, the entire series, the review, anything you want to talk about. You can always leave it down below and I'll have a discussion. But thank you so much for joining me today, guys. I hope to catch you in another video real soon. So, you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until the next time, you keep reading. Bye-bye, guys.